Imagine landing your dream job, the one you worked your entire life for, where every sleepless night, every sacrifice, every struggle finally pays off, and then the very moment you feel like you've made it, your own family turns around and tells you that your success doesn't even belong to you. That's exactly what happened to me, and to this day. I can't forget the way those words were said, cold and sharp, like a demand rather than a request. 50% for us, 30% for your sister. No excuses. It was supposed to be the proudest day of my life when I signed that offer letter. $400,000 a year. A number that still feels unreal when I say it out loud. But instead of hearing congratulations or seeing joy in my father's eyes, all I saw was calculation, expectation, and the weight of family obligation crashing down on me like a tidal wave. My story isn't just about money, it's about control, sacrifice, betrayal, and the brutal reality of how sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who will test your strength the hardest. I remember the moment vividly, sitting at the dinner table, the envelope with my new contract still in my bag, my mother serving food like nothing monumental had just happened, and my father clearing his throat in that way he always does before he delivers a statement he thinks is final. "Son," he said, "this family carried you to where you are now. Don't think for 1 second that you did this alone. So here's how it will be. 50% comes to us, 30% goes to your sister, and you can keep the rest." At first, I thought he was joking. I laughed nervously, waiting for him to smirk the way he sometimes did when he teased me. But the silence in the room told me it wasn't a joke. My sister looked down at her plate, not meeting my eyes, and my mother just kept her hands busy with the dishes, avoiding the storm she knew was about to come. And there I sat, stunned, realizing that in their eyes, my achievement wasn't mine, was theirs to divide, theirs to control, and mine only in name. My mind started racing back to every moment of my childhood, every lecture my father had given me about responsibility, every time he'd said, "Family comes first, no matter what," and I realized how those words had been training me for this exact moment. He didn't see my success as independent, he saw it as repayment, as if my entire life had been one long loan taken out in his name, and now that I had finally earned enough, it was time to pay the debt. I remembered nights when we barely had enough to pay the bills, when my father would remind me that he was sacrificing his comfort so I could study, when my mother would quietly sew torn clothes so that I wouldn't be embarrassed at school. I remembered the way my sister used to cry about not being able to afford things her friends had, and the silent guilt I carried for being the chosen one in the family, the one everyone said was destined to make it big. And now, here I was, the golden child who had finally struck gold, only to realize that the gold wasn't mine to hold. The dinner dragged on in silence, every clink of the spoon on the plate sounding louder than normal. My appetite gone, my stomach tied in knots. Inside, I was screaming, "This is my life, this is my job, this is my money. Why do you think you have the right to it?" But outside, I said nothing, too stunned to respond, too afraid to shatter the fragile peace that hung in the room. My father's eyes stayed locked on me, unblinking, as if daring me to challenge him, as if reminding me that in this house, his word was law. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying, that I had spent my whole life chasing success, not just for myself, but for them, and now that I had it, they weren't going to let me go without a fight. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the words echoing in my mind, 50% for us, 30% for your sister, no excuses. It wasn't the demand itself that broke MIT, was the certainty in my father's tone, the way he spoke as if the decision had already been made, as if my thoughts or feelings had no place in it. I tossed and turned, replaying the entire dinner, over and over again, wishing I had spoken up, wishing I had slammed my fist on the table and told him, "No, this is mine," but that wasn't me, not then. I had been raised to obey, raised to respect, raised to believe that family obligation was sacred. My father had always been the authority in the house, his voice final in every matter, his shadow stretching over every decision I had ever made. And now that I had finally reached a point in my life where I thought I could stand on my own 2 feet, he was pulling me back under that shadow. The irony was that he wasn't entirely wrong. My parents had sacrificed a lot for me. I remembered the nights when he worked double shifts so I could focus on school, the way my mother skipped meals to stretch the groceries, the way my sister sometimes gave up things she wanted so I could have books or supplies for my studies. I carried those memories like weights in my heart, and part of me felt guilty for even thinking of keeping all the money to myself. But the other part of me, the part that had endured the pressure, the expectations, the suffocating burden of being the one, that part screamed inside me, "You earned this. You suffered for this. You gave up your childhood for this. Why should they decide how you live now?" The more I thought about it, the more I realized how deep this control ran. It wasn't just about money. My father had always had a way of making everything transactional, turning love into obligation, turning support into debt. When I was younger, I thought that was just how fathers were supposed to be, demanding, always reminding you of what you owed them. But as I grew older, I started to notice how other families worked, how my friends' parents cheered for them, supported them, encouraged them, without expecting anything in return. That realization stung, and it planted a seed of resentment in me that had only grown over time. And now, with this new job, with this salary that could change my life forever, I felt that seed turning into something bigger, something more dangerous, determination to break free, no matter what it costs. But breaking free from family isn't easy. It's not like quitting a job or walking away from a friend. Family ties are woven deep, stitched into your identity, your sense of self. To reject them feels like rejecting a part of who you are. That's what kept me up that night. The war between loyalty and freedom, between guilt and desire. I knew that if I gave in, if I handed over that money without question, I would never be free. But if I stood up, if I fought back, I risked losing everything: the love, the connection, the bond I had with the people who had raised me. And in that moment, lying awake with the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me, I realized that this was going to be the hardest decision of my life. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen expecting the air to be lighter, maybe hoping my father had slept on it and realized how unfair his demand had been. But the moment I saw him sitting at the table, with his newspaper folded neatly in half and a pen tucked into the crease, I knew the conversation wasn't over. It was just beginning. He looked up, met my eyes, and without even a hint of hesitation, said, "So, when does the first paycheck come in?" Just like that. No good morning, no how did you sleep, just straight to business. Like I was some employee reporting to a boss. My mother busied herself with the tea, and my sister lingered near the fridge as if she was suddenly very interested in what was inside. But I could feel the weight of their silence pressing on me. My mouth went dry, and I muttered something about the payment schedule, avoiding his gaze. He nodded slowly, tapping the table with his fingers as though calculating in his head, already dividing the money before it even reached my account. In that moment, something inside me cracked. I wanted to scream that this wasn't fair, that I wasn't some machine programmed to earn and hand everything over, that I was a human being with dreams, responsibilities, and a right to my own life. But the words caught in my throat, strangled by years of conditioning, years of being told to be grateful, to respect, to obey. Instead, I sat there, sipping tea that tasted like ash, while my father outlined his vision for how the money would be used wisely. He talked about paying off debts, about upgrading the house, about finally giving my sister the wedding she deserved, and about setting aside a fund that he would manage on my behalf, just to make sure nothing foolish happens. Every word felt like a chain tightening around me. I wasn't just giving them money, I was surrendering control over my future. My sister finally spoke, her voice soft, almost apologetic. "It's not that we don't appreciate what you've done," she said, still not meeting my eyes, "but you know how hard it's been. This is like all of us winning together." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to see this as a family victory, but deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't about all of us, it was about them using my success as their safety net. And as much as it hurt, I began to realize that if I didn't stand up now, I never would. The rest of the day blurred into a haze of forced conversations and heavy silences, but beneath it all, a fire had been lit inside me. I couldn't keep living under this kind of control. I couldn't spend the next years of my life handing over my hard-earned money while my dreams withered away. For the first time in my life, I started to think about escape, not just moving out, but truly breaking free, carving out a life that was mine and mine alone. The thought scared me, but it also thrilled me. And as I lay in bed that night, staring at the same ceiling fan that had mocked me the night before, I whispered to myself, "I have to find a way out." A week later, the first paycheck landed in my account, and instead of the overwhelming joy I had always imagined, I felt dread wash over me. I had dreamt of this moment for years, opening my banking app and seeing numbers I once thought were only possible for people born into privilege, but, instead of excitement, my chest tightened as I thought of my father's expectant eyes, his voice already echoing in my head demanding his share. I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the screen, the glow of my phone illuminating the tension in my face, and I realized that this wasn't freedom at all, it was just another set of shackles, polished and dressed up to look like success. That evening, I returned home with my thoughts spinning, debating every possible approach. Should I confront him directly and say no? Should I pretend the payment was delayed? Should I transfer some money as a compromise? Each scenario played out in my head like a storm, but every version ended with his disappointment, his anger, his cold silence that I knew too well. When I walked into the house, my father was already at the table, as if he had been waiting for me. His first words confirmed it. So, did it come? I hesitated for a moment too long, and he immediately narrowed his eyes. My mother glanced at me with worry, as though silently urging me to comply, while my sister stood awkwardly, her hands fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. I swallowed hard and nodded. Yes, it came. His face lit up, not with pride, but with victory, as if my paycheck was proof that his years of dominance had finally paid off. Good, he said. Let's sit down and do this properly. He pulled out a notebook, the kind he always used to record expenses, and began dividing the money aloud. 50% here, 30% there, and you'll have the rest. See, fair. My hands clenched into fists under the table. Fair. That word stung more than anything else, because there was nothing fair about it. Fair would have been allowing me to breathe, to enjoy the fruits of my labor, to finally live without constant pressure. Instead, I was being turned into a provider, a bank account with legs. Something inside me finally snapped, though it didn't show on my face. I nodded along, even transferred the money that night, but deep inside, I made a silent vow. This was the last time. I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep bleeding out my future just to appease people who didn't see me as a person anymore, only as a paycheck. That night, after everyone went to sleep, I stayed up making plans. I researched apartments far from home. I calculated budgets. I looked into transferring money into separate accounts that only I could access. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just dreaming of freedom, I was planning it. And though fear gnawed at me, the thought of carving out a life that was truly mine filled me with a kind of strength I had never felt before. The very next month, when the second paycheck arrived, the weight on my chest grew heavier, because I knew what was coming. My father had tasted control once, and he wasn't about to let go. He called me into the living room before I could even put my bag down, his notebook already open, his pen tapping impatiently against the paper. You know the drill, he said, as if I were an employee, clocking in, not his son who had fought tooth and nail for years to get to this position. My mother hovered nearby, wringing her hands, and my sister sat quietly in the corner, her eyes flickering with something that looked like guilt, but wasn't strong enough to become action. My pulse quickened, but this time, I didn't move immediately. I stood there, frozen, the rebellion inside me swelling against the dam of obedience I had carried all my life. Dad, I started, my voice low, almost shaking. I can't keep doing this. His head snapped up, eyes narrowing, the air in the room instantly tense. What do you mean you can't? You will. Don't forget who raised you. Don't forget the roof over your head. Don't forget the sacrifices that brought you here. Each word was a hammer pounding guilt into my skull, the familiar tactic he had used for years. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to keep speaking. I'm grateful, I'll always be grateful, but this isn't fair. I worked for this. I put in the years. I made the sacrifices too. I can't live if every dollar is decided for me. The silence that followed was suffocating. My mother's eyes welled with tears. My sister looked away, and my father's face twisted, not in disappointment but in rage. So that's how it is, he spat. You think you're too good for this family now? You think because you make some money, you get to turn your back on us? His voice rose with every word, booming through the walls, each syllable drenched in accusation. My hand shook, my heart pounded, but I stood my ground. For once in my life, I wasn't going to fold. I'm not turning my back, I whispered, my voice breaking but my resolve steady. I just want a life of my own. His hand slammed against the table, making my sister flinch, and for a terrifying moment, I thought he might hit me. Instead, he pointed a finger in my face. "You ungrateful child. Everything you are is because of me. Without me, you're nothing. Don't ever forget that." His words cut deeper than any blow could have. I stumbled back, my chest tight, and in that moment, I realized the truth I had been denying for years. My father didn't see me as his son anymore. He saw me as an investment, one he expected to control for as long as I lived. That night, I packed a small bag in secret. I couldn't keep living under his thumb, couldn't keep handing over the very life I had built with my own sweat and tears. The fear was immense, the guilt unbearable, but beneath it all burned a quiet determination. I didn't know where I was going yet, but I knew one thing for sure: I was leaving. I left before dawn. The house still wrapped in silence. The only sound the creak of the old floorboards beneath my feet as I carried my bag toward the door. My heart raced. My palms were slick with sweat, but I kept moving, afraid that if I paused, even for a second, the guilt would drag me back. When I stepped outside, the cool morning air hit me like a splash of water, sharp and sobering, and for the first time in years, I felt the faintest whisper of freedom. I had found a small apartment, across town, nothing fancy, just a modest space with peeling paint and a shaky old radiator, but it was mine alone. Signing that lease felt more liberating than signing the $400,000 job contract, because this time there were no strings attached, no one hovering over me with a ledger, no one telling me how much of myself I had to give away. But leaving didn't mean peace. The calls started almost immediately, first from my mother, begging me to reconsider, then from my sister, torn between sympathy and loyalty, and finally from my father, his voice dripping with fury. "So you think you can just walk away? After everything I've done for you, you think you can survive without us?" His words rattled in my chest, igniting both fear and anger, but I didn't answer. I couldn't. Every instinct in me wanted to pick up, to explain, to defend myself, but I knew it would only pull me back into the same cycle of guilt and control. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, the silence became bearable. I learned to cook simple meals for myself, to sit in my tiny living room with secondhand furniture, and breathe without feeling watched. I began to enjoy the rhythm of my work, to watch my paycheck land in my account and stay there, untouched by anyone else's demands. For the first time, I bought things I wanted without guilt, treated myself to small luxuries like books, coffee from a nice cafe, even a new pair of shoes I had eyed for months. Each purchase felt like a rebellion, a declaration that I was no longer living under someone else's rules. But with freedom came loneliness too. There were nights when I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had done the right thing, wondering if my family would ever forgive me, wondering if I would ever forgive myself for breaking away. And yet, even in those moments of doubt, I knew I couldn't go back. I couldn't unsee the way my father had looked at me not as his child, but as a source of income. That wound ran too deep to be ignored. Months later, when the holidays came around, my mother invited me back for dinner. I almost didn't go, but something in me longed for closure. When I walked into the house, everything looked the same, but the air was different, thicker, heavier. My father sat at the table, his face stony, his eyes refusing to meet mine. My sister hugged me briefly, her smile forced but kind, and my mother fussed over me like she always did. We ate in near silence, the weight of everything unsaid, pressing down harder than any argument could. Finally, my father spoke. "So you're happy now, living on your own, forgetting your family." His tone was biting, but there was something underneath it, something almost like sadness. I took a deep breath and met his eyes for the first time in months. "I'm not forgetting you," I said softly, "but I have to live my life. I can't give it all away, not even for family." For a long moment, he said nothing. His jaw tightened, his hands clenched. But then, for the briefest second, I thought I saw a flicker of understanding in his eyes. It didn't erase the pain, it didn't fix the damage, but it was something, and that was enough. That night, when I walked back to my own apartment, I felt a strange calm settle over me. My life wasn't perfect, my family ties weren't healed, but I had done the hardest thing I'd ever had to do.